Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Sometimes I have been told that I can be full of myself.
I think I may have told you that on occasion.
So, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both?
It depends on the situation, the situational dynamics. If I need you to be a certain way, like if you're 7 years old and I'm a classroom teacher and I need you to tend to the lesson, follow the behavioral rules, and you're full of yourself and you've got to pick at Mary Sue and poke Joey and tell jokes or make fart noises or whatever you need to do to get a reaction from the class, I'm going to be of the opinion that you are full of yourself and that's a negative thing. But if you're full of yourself because you just feel good about who you are and you're happy to be here and you're going to engage in whatever we're doing, then I'll be happy about that. And I'll say, well, you're really full of yourself today, and that's a good thing.
But if we talk about people who are egocentric, so full of themselves,
Okay.
That's a different thing than somebody who has self-esteem.
Well, I believe that the American culture, over the last 20 years, spent a lot of energy and production in service of what I call the false self-esteem movement. We don't pick winners and losers. We don't have grade tracks. Everybody gets a gold star. Everybody gets a ribbon and a trophy, no matter how well they performed. And I think that's been a huge disservice to this country and to our children.
Well, I think there's been a lot of literature that shows that if you reward somebody for something that they themselves recognize they should not be rewarded for, that's actually a detriment to self-esteem.
Absolutely, it is. And yet we sold ourselves to the idea that that's the way we ought to run our competitive athletics, our competitive schooling. Any standard of comparative judgment had to be restricted so that everybody could be a winner.
Well, I talk about this and did talk about this a lot when we used to work in the schools when we were doing school consulting. This idea that during the 70s there was this real push towards a concept called value-free education.
Yeah.
But you were teaching during that time. And,
yes, I was.
And do you remember when that happened?
Yeah. My perspective on that as a teacher, classroom teacher in a public school district, was that there were cycles of themes and theories that went through education. And somebody would publish a book or write an article that would get a lot of notoriety, and then all the school districts would say, well, we need to do that. That's how we need to be doing this. And some of that whole value-free stuff was that you cannot ever contend systemically that the judgment of the system is the ultimate criterion. And so you can't say children from a different neighborhood are less than. Children of a different color, children of different religion, whatever. We're all God's children. We all have the same needs and the same emotional things, and so we should just educate people to be accepting of that. So then you had to make sure that your discipline was not racially discriminatory. Even if the behaviors in the classroom were not acceptable and the people providing the unacceptable behaviors were of a particular subgroup. You had to be able to document that you had done it consistently so that there was complete neutrality in your presentation of the message.
Right.
So how do you do that? How do you say, well, this is how it works? I mean, in athletics, probably the easiest example to use is athletics or competitions like spelling bees. You got 2 or 3 kids in the room, they're always going to win the spelling bee or the math bee or the history bee or whatever. And you got 2 or 3 kids that are never going to win it no matter what.
Right.
So how do you have competitive opportunities where people really invest themselves in doing well if everybody gets the same reward at the end of the day? They all get an A.
Well, so the question then, I guess for me, would be, and I remember going into schools and actually having this conversation with administrators and people that were running the programs there.
We should probably comment here that my wife used to be a school teacher who taught your children in grade school.
Yes, she did.
And you had these conversations
to whom
with her.
I am eternally grateful because she actually, when my son was in third grade, helped him through a really, I would say, dark time. He was having a lot of anxiety, and she was absolutely seminal in getting him through that, and we still talk about that to this day. We were just talking about it
really
the other
good at
night.
that.
Yeah, she was fantastic at that. But when I would go to the schools, one of the things that I would have a conversation with people about is, do we need to have these competitive kinds of status seeking activities? Should society be driven to that? Should we keep score?
Well, society expects us to. It seems to be a requirement
Well, they expect
of
us to, but
society.
that doesn't mean that that's right.
And this is where we start to get into some really fuzzy ground, because if I remember when school districts would have these huge meetings and lots of pressure, lots of discussions on how do we change the grading system. We want to go to a non-graded system. So we'd come up with like a 12-page report card for every child, and we couldn't give them a percentage score or a letter grade score like A, B, C, D. We had to write descriptive sentences about John's ability to keep his hands to himself has improved significantly this week. However, his ability to articulate the consonant P and K and D clearly has not reached the level that we would require for his being able to read. So you had to do this for every child in your class. And they wanted paragraph descriptors. They didn't want a score. But then we'd do that, and they trained us. The school district spent a lot of money having people learn how to write these descriptive paragraphs. They give us cheat sheets. Here's some nice paragraphs you can write. Just say Sally and put that in there. But then, so then we'd have parent-teacher conferences, and the parents would come in, and we'd go through the thing with them, and they'd be like, okay. But did she score higher than Brenda? And I'm like, well, hey, let's look at what she's doing well here. Let's look at her strengths and her weaknesses, what we want her to work on. And this is how you can, we want you to go home and read to your child for a half hour every night this week. Will you do that? Oh, sure. Well, they never would.
Right. Sure.
But then they'd be upset because
the
Shelly wouldn't learn to read.
Didn't achieve.
Yeah. And how could they not do, my brother has 2 kids that go to the school. My kids are smarter than his. They need to be making A's. His kids are best they're going to do is a C. And if you take away that evaluation process and you go to an essay format, then they're going to be really unhappy.
Well, but let's just say self-esteem just as a concept.
Yeah.
Do you believe that there has to be some kind of scorekeeping or some kind of value judgment associated with the way that society is driven for people to develop self-esteem?
I think we innately do that ourselves, whether society
So
does
you think
or
that
not.
the
I know if
individual-
I have done a good job. I know if I am invested in something or if I'm skating. I know whether the boss comes in and says, hey, you guys did a great job on this project. I know whether I did or not.
So do you think, so you would say that is inherently then at least perceptually, a kind of scorekeeping?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a challenge then is to find a way to articulate that and present it so that other people can objectively evaluate. But we're talking about 2 different things. We're talking about the systemic process of education.
Yes.
And how does that get accomplished so that people reach a certain standard? They
Right.
have to have a certain. You got to be able to read and write. In today's world, you got to be able to use a keyboard. If you can't do that, you're not going to be employable. You're not going to be able to go out and support yourself and be a productive, contributing member of society. We have to get a certain level of performance out of you. How do we do that without having comparative standards? And how do we do that in a way that accurately communicates to you, here is where your strengths and weaknesses are. This is where and how, because we're educators, we want to teach you, this is how you get better in this area. You don't do as well in math. Here are some skills that will improve your math performance. Let's learn these.
So I have a theory, a thing that I tell people that I will share with you, and you
Sure.
let me know if you agree with this or not. I believe that self-esteem, which is the global perception of self,
Yeah.
is like a house that's built on a foundation. And while you can't really do much to affect the structure of the house, you either have a good foundation or a bad foundation. And that the foundation is what's called self-confidence. So the ability to believe in a certain domain that you can do well. So you could believe that you're a really good baseball player and still have poor self-esteem. And that if you have the majority of the domains that you operate in are things that you believe in confidently, then your self-esteem is innately going to be good.
I agree with some of that. I don't agree with all of it. I think some of the self-esteem has to be the feedback loop that you get from people that you value.
But why wouldn't that be in the confidence area?
Because it may not be valid. I mean, I may think I'm really good at playing baseball or hitting a ball,
Right.
and I may not be
Right,
objectively good.
No, but still, that would be in that area of, for me, in that domain of baseball. And you could, because you could not be good at baseball,
Yeah.
and believe that you are, and feel really good about yourself.
So I was not very good at baseball, and I wanted to be, because baseball heroes
Yeah,
were,
yeah.
they were studs.
Yeah,
They
I had the same
class.
relationship
Yeah.
with football.
So I was not able to make the team.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't cut it. They said, go home.
Mm-hmm.
You're irritating us. So instead, I learned that I could be a sports reporter for the school paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I could ride the team bus. I could interview the players and the coach. I could get my picture in the paper or their picture in the paper. They liked me a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And I became more acceptable to them, which was my goal.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in that group. I want to be part of that group. But I wasn't able to make the team. I wasn't good enough. So I had to find a way to solve the need that I had that allowed me to have a sense of self-esteem, but also allowed me to get feedback that said I had value from the system. So I did.
So how would that be? So how do you see that different than what I'm saying about you have to have confidence in multiple domains to be able to have
I think part of your
self-esteem.
ability to have confidence is to get feedback from external systems.
No, I agree with that.
That say, hey, we value you. We value your contribution.
But I still think that it is the confidence in multiple domains that then, so my thing is I have an issue when people say, oh, let's work on your self-esteem, because there's no way to
Yeah, we
to
can,
do
we can narrow
that.
it down to a lane.
Right.
Let's work on this.
So we
part
work
of
on, the
Yeah.
individual domains, the
Okay, so I
confidence,
don't think
and
we're saying
then
anything different.
yeah, I think, and usually that's what happens, is that we have different language, but we have the same conceptual things. Because that's what I do with people, is that I talk about, I can't really do anything for your self-esteem. Now, maybe there's somebody out there who can. I don't know how they would do that, but because it's immutable. It's your global concept of self. It's just there. It just exists. And it's either good or it's bad, but it's built on this foundation of these domains that you operate in, the things that you do that you either believe you are good at or you don't. And you can get feedback. Like, I was good enough to make the team, but I wasn't good enough to play regularly.
Yeah.
But every year, and it didn't have to be this way because I wasn't the only person who didn't play all the time. But every year I was voted by my teammates and my coaches as most improved or hardest worker or things like that. And so my confidence as a football player wasn't in that I was, tearing up the field and making, tackles and intercepting the ball and scoring touchdowns. It was that I came to practice every day. And I talked about practice, unlike Allen Iverson. And I made it my goal to show everybody that I was going to work as hard or harder than any other member of that team.
Yeah.
And that was my identity.
And your sense of self-esteem.
And my sense of self-esteem.
Right. Because you were aware of your level of commitment and participation. Mm-hmm. So that's a goal in educational system and parenting system. How do you raise a child to have that?
But what we were talking about off mic was this idea of false self-esteem. And I think that what happens, that what we've seen in our society
rewards
today.
And you didn't do it.
Right. Yeah. Because people don't know how to alter the goal, right? So score
Or the system's not willing to let
is
you
a
hurt.
changeable thing. Yes.
The system is not willing to let you hurt. So they say, well, because you
Yes.
can't make the team, we'll still give you a jersey and a letter.
Right.
And it used to be, in order to get you can have the jersey, but the only way you're going to get the letter is if you play in 12 quarters of football over a 10-game season.
Right.
If you didn't get in the game for 12 quarters, and everybody kept track. I mean, everybody knew exactly how many minutes of every quarter they played. I was in 3 quarters this week. I was in 2 quarters last week, so that they could get the letter and get a letterman's jersey. And I mean, that's just a visible example. But whether you're singing in the school choir, I remember being in the school choir. I couldn't carry a note in a bucket, and they said, you have to come to class. This is a required mandatory thing, and you have to go out for our concerts, like Christmas concerts. But you have to lip sync. Don't make any noise, because you pull the whole section of the choir off when you try to sing. That wasn't good for my self-esteem.
No, that's that. Well, I would say it's not good for your confidence.
Well, I don't seem to suffer a deficit about confidence, but I found other areas where I could be confident.
Exactly, because you don't have to be confident in every area.
Oh, yeah, I won't sing.
Just in a majority of the ones that you operate in.
Yeah.
But what I tell people, and I think that there's a difference between this idea, this concept of false self-esteem, which I am all over and just think is horrible, but also with what I'm talking about, people can create their own innovative goals so that they can achieve confidence and self-esteem, even if it's different than what society says. So I, didn't score a lot of touchdowns, didn't get a lot of interceptions, didn't make a lot of tackles, but I still felt really good about my football career because I was a really hard worker, and that's what I focused on. People can do that for themselves, right? If you like to cook, but people say that they don't like to eat your cooking,
right?
Guess what? That's okay. You can be the best bad cook in the world and take great joy and pleasure in the process.
Yeah, except that I would modify that message. I mean, I hear your point, but I would say find something else to be good at. I mean, you can cook, but don't put your pride and your self-identity in the fact that you're a good cook, because you're not. But find something that you are good at, or that you think you can be good at, and go do that. I didn't play high school sports, but I was on the debate team because I was really good at talking, and I became a state champion debater. That supported my ego. And same thing about grades. Not all of us are going to make the National Honor Society. Not all of us are going to make the National Merit Finalist. Not all of us can do that. We just don't have that ability. But that doesn't mean we don't have value. That doesn't mean we don't have strengths that we can contribute from and take satisfaction in.
Right.
Let's go find what we do well.
So let's spend some time talking about this idea of the false self-esteem, because I think that's a huge thing. We both have heard anecdotal stories and have seen evidence of this phenomenon where people go to school and they get degrees and they appear to be very well adjusted, but then they go out into the real world, and the first time somebody tells them, hey, this isn't how we do things, they're in the fetal position underneath their desk because they can't handle it. They've never heard that.
Right.
And so what do we do in that situation?
Well, you start younger and you let them fail. You have to set up situations where they can fail and experience failure, and then they can recover from that. And they can say, wait a minute, that didn't kill me. And maybe I'm not going to be the best singer. Maybe I'm not going to ever sing. But what I did do was become a radio disc jockey. And I played other people's music. I found a way to be connected to that domain where I could be successful.
And completely unconnected to this, I actually, when I was looking around doing show prep, had downloaded an article from Psychology Today that I meant to send you and didn't, that was all about let kids fail. And I think that we've gotten to a point in our society where parents and the societal structures
they're going to be suicidal.
Are terrified
he doesn't make the baseball team
to let him
kill
fail
himself.
Yeah.
You got to start young and you got to let them have failure, and you got to let them feel bad. We can't all feel good all the time.
Because if they never ever have that opportunity, they never learn how to right the ship.
Right.
I mean, you can't know how to do a thing that you've never had an opportunity to do.
Yes.
And so how is anybody ever going to learn how to rebound if they've never stumbled and fallen?
Well, but the thing you talk about all the time about doing counseling is you talk about the importance of emotional regulation.
Yeah.
If you don't experience failure and loss, you can't emotionally regulate.
That's true.
Because and eventually you're going to experience failure and loss. I mean, if your parents bought you the golden spoon and you went all the way through childhood and never had any moment where you didn't have everything that you wanted, then you get out in the world and you try to get a job and they won't hire you, or they hire you and then they fire you. You're devastated. You don't have any resilience for recovery because you never learned how to have it. And the only way you're going to learn how to have it is you got to experience loss and failure.
So we got to land this plane, but what do we say to parents? Because I struggle with this. I do it, but let them fail.
Absolutely.
Let them do it. And parents don't want to hear that, but you have to, as a parent, my feeling is you have to love and respect your child enough to allow them to fail. That is a loving and respectful thing to do.
But
and people would argue with me about that, but I believe that with every fiber of my existence.
Well, you bring them to it in graduated steps throughout their lifetime.
Well, sure.
You don't let them
play with glass
and then
right.
Be in a life or death situation. Here I go drive the car.
Right.
So you teach them, and then you discuss it with them, and you hug them, and you say, you have value and merit more than this. This is just a thing, and this hurts. Yes, it hurts. I'm sorry you hurt. And maybe you can get better at it, and maybe you need to find something different.
A severe thunderstorm watch has been issued for your location.
Oh, really? Well, that's a good piece of information to have.
That will happen periodically whenever the weather department wakes up. So they want to feel good about themselves and be able to tell us these things.
And for those people who don't know, we are in St. Louis, and so apparently we're going to have some rain in St. Louis.
And whenever this airs, you'll know if we live through it.
That's right.
But we will be happy either way.
They won't know because until the next episode.
Right.
So therefore they should stay tuned.
They should tune in.
So if you want to get a hold of us, please get us on the website where the podcast lives, which is psychwithmike.com. And if you're watching us on YouTube, there is a little icon in the bottom right-hand corner that is to subscribe. Please click that, subscribe to the channel, and like our videos. We always appreciate that. And leave us some comments. We love hearing from people who are listening to the show.
Especially when they agree with us.
I'm okay either way, but
yes, we are, because we have good self-esteem.
That's right. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is always written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.